This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Mariette's on the move.
What?
Mariette's on the move.
Again?
Mariette's on the move.
If you're dreaming about moving to a new city to pursue the life of your dreams, this podcast is for you. Moving 18 times in 23 years to 5 of America's top cities, I know it's not easy to make those decisions alone. I help you develop the dream, the plan, and the move, even if we need to get scrappy to get you there. I'll be doing interviews, career and city spotlights, and sharing my crazy moving stories, tips, tricks, and scams to avoid. Traveling to explore your dreams has never been easier. Now let's get moving. Well, hey everybody. I am super excited to introduce my guest, Edward Whitehouse. He is the general manager of Top Notch Moving, where he manages sales, operations, and finances. Edward's been with the company for 1.5 years and 5 years in the moving industry. So he's got a ton of stuff that he's going to be bringing to the conversation today. But he's really committed to ensuring that Top Notch has the best possible service for their clients. And I truly believe that. We have had several conversations, even leading up to this conversation, between emails and texts and just kind of getting to know him. So I think that you're going to love the conversation. When he's not working, he can be found cheering on his favorite sports teams out of New York. Everybody that listens to the podcast probably knows by now that I lived in New York. I was on the Upper East Side, went to a lot of Yankees games. So I'm glad that you're a Yankees fan, first off. But you also cheer for the Giants and the Rangers. And I got to meet briefly your lovely little golden retriever. So Ed, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Excited to kind of get the ball rolling.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I would love for you to tell me about Top Notch, because I know you're a family-owned and operated moving company, and I prefer that over somebody that's, working with a broker or a big van line. So you're out of Hackensack, New Jersey, which I have actually been to, and I have friends that listen to the podcast that live there. So you might have a small little network that I get to introduce you to if they ever move. But yeah, tell me a little bit about Top Notch and kind of how you got involved with them, what you love about them, tell us about what you guys do.
Yeah. So outside the Billy Joel reference that everyone likes to mention, so my good friend David, he had been in the moving industry for a while, was working as a driver at a local moving company in New Jersey, and I had connected with him through friends, and we'd both been in the moving industry, and we wanted to kind of collaborate on a new venture to kind of I guess to re-energize or rethink the moving industry. A lot of movers are here in New Jersey, but they don't really take a family-owned approach that we kind of embrace. So we kind of handhold all of our clients start to finish, whether it's a small apartment job or you're moving a loved one to a senior care center or you're going across the country. We kind of treat everyone as if they're our own. We had probably a lot of hardships initially, but we have kind of, found our way, and now we're year 4, looking to continue to grow.
I mean, moving is interesting because I don't care how many times you've done it, it still sucks sometimes, right? And so if you have a mover that is just completely absent in the conversations, or you can't get a hold of them, or you just feel like you're not being taken care of up front, subconsciously, I feel like we go to that place where we're like, are they really taking care of my stuff? I know they're packing it all up and they're putting it on a truck, and what if I never see it again?
Yeah.
So it is scary.
So I always use the fun fact, and I don't know if it's actually true, because if you ask some of your friends, according to industry legend, people say they move 11 times in their entire life. So obviously that's a lot. 1, 2, it's probably the second most stressful thing, I think, also that people face in their life. So, when you have the stress of
second to divorce, that's crazy.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So with it already being a stressful point in people's lives, they neglect to try and prepare for it because they don't even know where to start. where movers come in and where we like to come in is like, all right, you have people that have been here before. We know what we're doing. Let's take a deep breath and kind of like just scope out what this job's going to be.
Yeah.
So whether it's, a small local job or if they need packing, we bring in, partners that we work with to make the process more streamlined, less stressful, and, at the end of the day, efficient and nothing's broken, damaged. But like you were saying, it's something that in New Jersey we have a huge problem with the rogue movers, and that's something that I would love to talk to you about, because I don't know if you have faced that in North Carolina. I don't know if you've heard about rogue movers or unlicensed movers.
Yeah, I feel like it's getting more and more sophisticated, more and more scammy, just because we've got the internet and you can Google and they can, change their name a million times.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that people don't realize is that the local movers sometimes do long distance moves. So like if you have a
Yep.
local mover like Top Notch, you could literally use them for a long distance move, and they don't often realize that. But so like
Yeah.
talk me through a little bit between, the local versus the long distance, like, as you see it from where you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And then about these rogue movers and like how you kind of avoid working with them, or how you even like sniff them out, right? When you're talking
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah. I mean, it's really tough, like you said. So to answer your first question, local versus long distance. So we at Top Notch, our local kind of definition's a little bit bigger than probably
Okay.
most, only because we like to cover New Jersey as a whole. Generally speaking, we'd like to keep a certain radius of where we are in Hackensack to do the pickups, but we're not going to say no if we have a friend or referral or, anyone that calls us, so we appreciate if someone calls us looking for us, that we're going to provide a good service for them. So we pick up and service anywhere in New Jersey. Now, like you said, you could probably find a local moving company that may be down in South Jersey, which is considered for me anything lower than Bergen County. There
Okay.
is such thing as a Central Jersey. I guess it's coming into legislation, but if you find like a more local moving company in the town that you're in, you're probably going to get a little bit better price than instead of Top Notch driving 2 hours to your pickup. And then in terms of the long distance, that's a little bit trickier in the sense that we offer what we call a direct delivery for clients. So say you're in New Jersey and you're looking to move to Florida. We're getting a lot of people moving to Florida. Another tidbit, in the past 5 years, New Jersey has more outbound than inbound. More people are moving
Oh,
away from New Jersey than
interesting.
into New Jersey. And that's kind of unfortunately the same 3 or 4 reasons. People like nicer weather. With COVID,
Mhm.
obviously you don't need to be commuting into the city or being in like an urban area, and then taxes and there's thing I can go on and on.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're looking for, like you said, a local moving company, some people think, oh, only because we're based in New Jersey, we're not going to travel to Chicago, Texas, Tennessee, Maine, North Carolina, South Carolina. We can provide that service. And we do that directly. So we will pick up your items, and depending on where you're going, we can get it to you within a reasonable time frame. And that reasonable time frame is within 36 hours to 48 hours.
Oh,
We do
wow.
have to follow the rules and regulations of the Department of Transportation and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration.
It's a
Just
mouthful.
because, yeah, it is a mouthful. So everyone does, code words, DOT, and then
Yeah.
FMCSA,
MCSA. I
or
have to think about it
yeah,
every single time too. I like
right.
FMCSA. Like I see it
So
in my head.
so many acronyms.
Yeah.
And so when we're going long distance, you can only drive a certain amount of time. There's wait stations you have to go into each state. So it does get a little bit of a lengthier process. But you are getting a full service, meaning, what we provide is, full disassembly of your furniture. We bring the moving blankets to wrap and pad it. Then we'll load the boxes in, then we'll load the furniture in, and then head down to said location. Once we're down there, we have our own team, with Top Notch from New Jersey. The same crew that's picking it up is going to be delivering it down to your location.
And
Um,
that's huge. So here's the thing, like my moves, and I've made the mistake many times. I've never used a direct mover, candidly.
Right.
Because I've moved to 5 of America's top cities, a lot of times when I was moving, I was part of a load, so if we're
Yeah.
doing like a moving 101 and like getting back to the basics. So what they'll do is they'll and by they I mean like a semi truck. So if it's a standard 3-bedroom 2-bathroom house, like they assume you have somewhere between 10 and 15,000 pounds. You're going to share a semi truck with probably 2 or 3 different homes depending on how much stuff you have. And so what they do is they'll pick it up with a smaller truck, they'll bring it to a warehouse, they'll
Yep.
compile everything into one big semi, and that's like putting your stuff all the way up to the ceiling and
Yep.
smashing it all in. I mean,
Yep.
like I typically would have one moving group come in and load it. And if they weren't actually bringing the semi to me, they would, bring it to a different truck. Like, so for New York City, for example, like they can't bring a semi into the city, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to, so you're essentially paying for the move that they pick up, the semi that drives it across, then the moving onto a smaller truck and then delivering it into the cities. You're paying for, sometimes 2 or 3 moves.
Oh yeah.
And people don't realize that, right? And
No.
especially crossing
No.
state lines, that gets expensive. But so a direct move means you are physically picking my stuff up here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you are driving it physically to Chicago. And then you're coming back with an empty load unless you have another move that's bringing you from Chicago to Jersey, right?
Correct. Correct. Now, I think you touched on a couple of things that I wanted to kind of emphasize. So, when you are looking at what you're calling a consolidated load, you have to be very wary and read the contract very specifically as to what you're signing up for. Because like you said, a lot of these nationwide companies are switching hands, meaning, they may have a local guy picking up the load, and then, like you said, they'll load everything up. Now they're taking everything off. Then they're putting it into a warehouse. Then they're putting it on a tractor trailer. So then it compounds the percentages to damages, things getting lost, things getting stolen, things getting mixed up. So although you are getting a rather discounted or cheaper price than what you would be getting from a local family owned direct moving company, there are, cons for that.
Mhm.
But, it doesn't mean to say that if you are, moving a 1-bedroom from New York down to Miami and you're not in a rush, that's not a great route to go, because there are still, legitimate or, companies that do their due diligence and make sure that it's ran correctly. But I think one thing, going back to the moving basics, is that there's a lot going on. People are super sensitive and super emotional of what's happening, that they don't really figure out, like, oh, I see a box truck here and it's a tractor trailer here. And now so there's a lot of components, and it's
Yeah.
not really like, ABC, all your ducks in a row and you visually see it. You see your stuff getting loaded onto a truck, and then you don't really realize that it's may not be the same truck, or it's in a tractor trailer and it's
It's
changed hands,
hectic.
because they
Well,
don't want to tell you that,
right. It's hectic. And you're at that point when you're receiving your stuff. I mean, they have up to what, 6 weeks? I mean,
Yep.
they could give you a 3-day window, but it could take up to 6 weeks. I've heard scams, um, and I'm going to be interviewing, I think we're trying to set it up right now, the Florida senator who is trying to get legislation passed about the scams that are coming into Florida, because they may start in New Jersey, but when that person gets to Florida and their stuff doesn't get there I heard, like, one article I read was almost a year, and like her daughter in New Jersey was chasing after these guys. Nobody could get a hold of them. She still hadn't gotten her stuff. And it was a year later. She even moved her car with them. So, but that now becomes Florida's problem, right? So now she resides technically in Florida, and that's who she has to place the complaint with. But you did touch on
Mhm.
something really important, and you don't know if things are getting stolen or broken or anything, and you really don't know that until your stuff's in the house. Like, I had 2 glass covers to go over my matching set of dressers that are like have literally been in my family for a million years. Like, I think I've had these dressers for 20 years, and I know the family member that had them before me probably had them for 40. I mean, I can go and get another glass piece made, but I didn't even realize that it was missing until like 2 weeks, until I had like unpacked everything. And I was like, what the hell? So by that point, like, if they break something on site, a lot of times the drivers will like literally try and pay you in cash for them. Like I had one, we'll call him Frank. Frank was a piece of work, and I still I have so many nightmares about Frank. But like Frank actually knocked over an entire box of wine glasses that were from my great grandparents, and he like kept trying to like pay me for them because he didn't want me to put an insurance claim in because he gets dinged on that, right? So
Yep.
I know that they're like insurance inherently is good,
Yeah.
right? Because you want your stuff insured, but like what when you are signing these contracts, I know that adds a lot
Yeah.
of money. Like, why is
Yeah.
insurance good? And like, what are your options? Because you can decline it,
Okay.
but then you're like taking a huge risk.
Yeah. So that's probably number two most frequently asked question for movers. And I'm going to try and make it as concise as possible when I try and explain to clients. Cause like you said, the contracts are bigger
Mhm.
than this screen here, that's in fine print, and they try and just make you sign it and rush through it, and you're not really educated on it.
Yeah.
So in New Jersey, another fun fact, we are actually, well, this is for local moves. We
Okay.
have the highest payout, which is $1 per article per pound. So it's done by weight, which is weird. And I think the long story short is that when the first ever legislation came out for movers is the only way that, how shipments are, weighed and calculated is through weight. So it's done by weight, and it's done $1 per article per pound. So
For
you don't
long
have to pay.
distance, right? It's
Oh no,
per
so long
pound,
distance, so
per
long
pound for long.
distance is
Yeah.
actually worse.
Okay.
It's 60 cents per pound.
Oh, geez.
So
Okay.
yeah, so I guess the idea being is that a lot of movers, especially a family-owned moving company, and not to put it in the clients, make negative light on the clients, is that they're going to say that their furniture is worth X, and X is going to be greater than Y, and Y is going to be your cost for the move. So why is a mover going to take that liability to move someone's stuff when they say that their stuff is more, and they're going to want everything back? So I
Right.
guess the fair compromise, which really is slighted towards the movers, which is not great, to be honest, to the client, but for a mover, it gives some sort of closure to the client that at least they try. Um, so it's 60 cents per pound. It's free of charge for any mover to provide it to the client. Now, when the client's signing it, they're not realizing like, hey, I brought a brand new flat screen TV that I spent $1,300 on, and that weighs 20 pounds. The mover's gonna be like, hey, here's a $20 check for your TV, you know?
Oh my gosh, I didn't even
So the
realize that. Yeah.
so the two other options that you can do is, unfortunately, it's good. Well, and in my case, since we're family owned and operated, it's outsourced. If
Mm.
you're moving with a national van line company, United, Atlas, Mayflower, they do have a full valuation insurance policy, but again, it's an added cost to the move.
Okay.
Which, if you're looking for insurance and peace of mind and everything like that, it's nice to have that coverage. So to go
Do you
back to it.
Well, I was
Oh,
gonna
go
say, do
ahead.
you have more, like if I were to have you guys pack my stuff, do I have more leeway on that? Or is it just like, this is what the
Yes,
rules are?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So good question. So in movers terms, it's called PBO, pack by owner. If
Okay.
you pack the stuff, you are responsible because we have the training to make sure everything's properly padded, protected, crated, etc. So if you pack the stuff and we move it, and you don't pack it properly, it's not on the mover because you packed it, unfortunately.
Got it.
So the two other, just to go back to what you were saying, the two other points you can do is full valuation. We have a third party moving insurance company that we refer a client to. And again, it's a full process. They ask you how much your stuff's worth, and then they write you a policy based on what you value your property at. But then it's an additional cost on your move, and you may not even use it. And then the third option would be is if you have homeowners insurance. It's very rare, especially when you're going out of state, that an insurance company is going to cover it because you're crossing state lines. But there are potential ones, I think.
But that's an interesting point to bring up, like checking with my insurance agent. And like, I
Yeah,
wonder if there's like a writer or something that they can do,
I know
knowing that I
State
would be
Farm.
moving. Yeah.
I know State Farm has some sort of policies, but again, um, a lot of things are moving because there's a lot of moving parts and there is high probability of damages and scratches. Um, People are wary, whether it's insurance for trucks, workman's comp, in warehouse. It's a high cost for a moving company to be run,
Mm.
but you do have options. So just be very careful as you're doing a due diligence process, which I'm more than happy to quickly go through if you're looking for a mover, questions to ask and things to consider when you're looking for it, especially with insurance, because again, you have family heirlooms that are, invaluable to you. Do you want to risk it to the movers and you pay 60 cents and they're gonna be like, hey, sorry, we broke it. Here's, a $200 check
Yeah.
because that's all we're obligated to pay.
Right.
So,
Well, let's take a break and
yeah.
we will hit that when we come back. All right, welcome back, everyone. So, Ed, we have lots of different things that we can discuss, and I know it won't be the last time you're on the podcast. So, I do want to kind of take a step back. I'm Susie Q that wants to move to, say, Chicago. Where do I
Okay.
start? Right. So, say I'm in Charlotte, which I am, and I
Mhm.
want to move long distance. Where do I start? Like, what questions do I ask when I call a mover? Where do I look? Do I get on the Better Business Bureau? Do I trust Google? Like, where do I start?
Great question. And I feel like this is a important thing for people to kind of listen to and think about. So I would always say if you can, the first option would be is does your realtor know anyone? Because I feel like the realtor, they've been intimate with you throughout the process, and they normally have a plethora of people that they can contact. So that would be my first thing, first place to look for. Second is if you do go on what we were just talking about earlier, the FMCSA, and you look by state, you can find licensed movers that are in your town that can offer long distance. That's number two. Number three, and I'm always wary about saying this, is you can go on Google, but with advertising, there's going to be sponsored ads of, national moving companies that are, or franchises that, will be saying, hey, you can move to Chicago for $1,700, which, people
That's
see
a
a
red
low
flag.
price and they're like, that's boom, I want that. Give
Yeah.
me that. And then it goes to a website and then this, advertisement, you put in your phone number, email, and then all of a sudden your phone goes buzzing like crazy because guess what? It put it onto a portal where movers are looking to find people like you going long distance. So
Yeah.
I would be wary of that. So what I would say is, if you're looking on Google, I would Google, local movers, Charlotte, North Carolina, and then do not go to the ads. Scroll down a little bit, and then
Yeah.
normally there's a map of Charlotte, and they're going to have moving companies there. And this may be a ridiculous thing to say, but just the other thing I would say is look on their website, click on their website, see what they have, make sure they don't have stock photos, check out their reviews. If they have 10 reviews and they're, 3.8, I would like maybe look at someone else say, hey, here's, North Carolina Moving Company 2 that has, maybe 80 reviews and it's 5-star. You want to figure out a moving company that, has decent reviews, that has, not paying for Google reviews. So go to their website, go to their reviews. As we were discussing before, a third thing, Better Business Bureau. Again, that has people that are verified. So you make sure they have a DOT, MC, which is a motor carrier's number, and they're verified. Only because, like you say, you don't want to get trapped with unlicensed movers or rogue movers. And then this is a big thing that you were asking, we were talking about before, is when you're going out of state, do not or if someone starts calling you because you put your name on an advertisement and they're going through, they're asking their due diligence questions of, are you an apartment, you're in a house, and they're just giving you a price over the phone, I would say, hey, I'm Susie Q. I would like to meet
Yes.
representative of this moving company. If they're a legitimate moving company, they're going to want to send someone out there because they want to understand the scope of the job.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you're in an apartment building, they want to see where the trucks can be able to park. Is what we in the moving industry, we ask if there's a long carry, meaning, how far the truck is to the elevator, and then from the elevator to your apartment. There's like these things that you need to consider. And then when you go to the apartment, how much packing assistance do they need? Do they have a lot of fragile items? They have a lot of wood furniture where we're going to need to bring a bunch of material. So if someone's giving you a price over the phone, I'd say like that's great and all, but I would love to have a representative or an estimator or the owner to come out and see it, because that's how we pride ourselves on is, unless someone's moving last minute and they need a mover, um, we try and have someone go out there. Now,
I always
oh,
recommend
go ahead.
that though. In fact, I recommend people get 3 bids. And the
Yeah,
reason I do it because inherently your spidey senses will go up if somebody makes you feel skeevy. And if somebody's feeling slimy, like most likely you're going to feel that way through your entire move. But if I meet somebody and they educate me and they tell me, they walk me through the contract. I think that's the other thing too, is that like
mhm,
physically walking through what you're signing and not pressuring you to sign it. Like that to me, I've had some really wild situations and most of the moves that I've made have been for relocations for my company. So I had a budget, but I also still knew that like going into that, if like one mover's telling me this is going to cost me $10,000 and another mover's telling me it's going to cost me 4, there's a pretty big discrepancy here and I need to figure it out. But the reason I tell people to have 3 bids and to have someone physically come to your house is you are always, always, always going to underestimate the amount of stuff you have. Your books
oh,
alone,
absolutely,
you have
absolutely,
one bookshelf. Your books alone could be 150 pounds, and you don't realize
absolutely.
it. Right. But I mean, when you're packing those boxes, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to put these in small boxes because they're heavier. Like that
Yep,
stuff adds up. All your decorations, your
yep,
files, people don't realize how much stuff they actually have and how much it actually, like the pounds it is. And when you're moving long distance, you pay by the pound. Right.
yep,
So, I mean, we can get into the packing. And I was laughing when you mentioned packing, because the packing, you guys go to physical packing seminars. I mean, they
yeah,
might be like from the 1960s, but like,
yeah,
but they teach you how to pack it, right? And as a POB or, somebody doing it on our
yeah,
own, like, we're going to bubble wrap it. We're going to do as well as we can. But like, there's something to be said for having you guys pack it if you're in a rush as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to think about. And like, you guys are going to estimate best. Like like I just happen to know that I have about 11,000 pounds worth of stuff. So if somebody tells me I have
right,
15,000, I'm like, you're a big fat liar, because I've done this 18 times. But
yeah,
like, but that's another thing too, is like on a local move, you pay by the hour typically, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So I guess I just wanted to throw in 2 things.
Yeah.
Um, Whenever people start the moving process and, they say, hey, our move's in 2 weeks, I'm going to start the packing. I always give a client a call a week before to be like, hey, Miss Jones, just want to let you know we're doing your move in a week. I know you said you started packing the items. How's it going? And maybe it's an exaggeration, but at least 6 times out of 10, they're
Nope.
like,
It's
oh,
probably
it's
true.
going fine. And then 2 days later, Edward, you need to come, or
Yeah.
we need you to come the day before to start packing, because it just gets overwhelming. Like you
Yeah.
start packing and you say, okay, I'm going to conquer the bookshelf tonight, and then I'm going to conquer the kitchen here, and I'm going to conquer the bedroom. And then you're like, wow, this is a lot
Hmm.
of things I got to pack. 1, 2, I definitely didn't realize that how much stuff I've accumulated, whether
And how
you're
long it
there for a
takes.
year,
Yeah.
for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and then, you're like, oh my
But
God, I
that's why
can't
I
get this done.
coach. I will give you a quick story, and I will not name
Yeah.
names. She's probably going to like kill me because I think she listens to the podcast. But I have a friend that, and I won't even say the city because it'll kind of give it away. But I have a
Yeah.
friend that it was a multifamily home, and they had never moved. Her mom hadn't moved in like 35 years. The situation was around divorce, so they were moving into another home, and she herself had never moved. So I called her a couple weeks in advance, and I said, hey, do you want me to come over? We can do a packing party. I'll bring some pizza. Like I'm a really hands-on coach when I'm like helping somebody, but I kept getting the Heisman, and they're like, no, it's okay. I think I got this under control. I think we're good. And literally, like, my spidey senses were like, she's not packing. I don't know why. Like, I just, the conversations we were having, I was like, okay, well, are you on your AirPods right now or AirPods? And are you packing boxes right now? Because I don't hear anything in the background. But so we literally, I show up that day. And a little tip for everybody, like, I'm a big proponent of like, the first thing you do when you get up is you eat, because it is so chaotic on moving day that you forget to eat, you forget to drink water, you forget to do a lot. Like, half the time people show up and they like haven't even showered or anything. And like, and then your day is already chaotic and it's dusty and all this stuff. But anyway, so I get there that morning. So, and I even called her 2 weeks before, a week before. And I was like, well, let me just come over and see. Right. And she's like, oh, we're kind of, shuffling around, and my daughter's got this. And so long story short, I show up, the movers are going to be there at 10. I show up at 8:30, breakfast in hand, everybody sits down, and I'm looking around and I go, so is this the house we're moving? And she's like, oh yeah.
My goodness.
I didn't see a single box anywhere. I was like, do you have boxes? I was literally like, oh my gosh. And I know the movers, like, this because you do moves weekly, but the movers are on a mission. This is a local move, right? But they're booked by the hour, and they don't always just have one move in a day. Sometimes they have two. So they had them booked from like 10 to 3, and they're like, oh, we don't have that much stuff. Well, oh my gosh, they had 35 years worth of stuff. And I literally was like, I just went into I can't even think of the word, but I just went into like ordering people around mode. And I just was like, call your sister and her husband, tell her to bring as many boxes as you can. You start in that room. Where's your boyfriend? Tell him to start in that room. And I'm like running around. So I did a quick time video as I'm like going into her office, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's stuff everywhere. Like, I'm pulling her mom's wedding dress out of the closet. I am like, oh my gosh. And now it's like 9:30, and the movers are like showing up, and I was like, oh my God, they're going to kill us. And so I literally had said, you guys, they haven't moved before, we're going to need some help. And they were so gracious about it, but they ended up canceling their second move or pushing it back to the next day because they hadn't been prepared enough, because they didn't know. And so part of why I do what I do, and like wanted to do this podcast to give people tips and have people like you on the show, is to walk through it before you get there. Right. Like, this is such a big deal, because your experience is one thing, but the movers, they have an experience too. And we want them to have a good experience as well, because people tip like shit. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I have two things to add to your point. So one, my favorite thing I hear on the phone whenever I send someone over a proposal and they're looking for movers, my favorite thing I hear is, I think my friends and I are going to do when they hear the price. And I was like, well, you might have the best friends on planet Earth, because I don't know, after a certain age, people
Nobody
are
wants
like,
to move
hey,
you.
let me just take a day off, or when my day is off, or I'm trying to hang out with my family, or, enjoy my weekend. Let me go stress out and go help move my friend. So I always think it's super funny. And you're actually probably the one person on planet Earth that wants to be like, hey, on my day off, let me go check in on the move, because
I know.
I guarantee you ask your friends, if you ask your friends, or if I ask my friends, hey,
scattering like cockroaches.
Yeah. So that's my favorite thing, is when I hear people saying that their friends are going to help, because I want to be like, can I be your friend's friend too? Because that's awesome. I want a friend like that.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, just to, like you said, of moving stories, if we're trading stories back and forth, not recently, but I think, 6 or 7 months ago, we literally were talking to the client. We like to be very proactive and communicative throughout the process. So, there's no surprises, or if there's things in a real estate transaction, the closing fell through, XYZ, that we're prepared and ready to go. we call them, no answer. This was in an apartment. It was an apartment move. So the doorman was like,
Okay,
calls
freight
up,
elevator and yeah.
well, long story short, the person slept through their alarm, it was 2 hours late. And I literally drove, knocked on the door, and the lady was like, sorry, I completely fell asleep. Like, normally you talk to people who are moving, they would be up at the crack of dawn. But
Yeah.
this lady was literally, like I said, in her PJs, still like on move day,
Oh
acting
no.
like it was just a standard walk in the park. I was like, this is gonna be
This
one of
is
those fun
hard.
moves that, she's gonna wake up, like her body is gonna wake up and she's like in full like, wow, I'm really moving. And like you said,
Yeah.
when the guys are where we are, or how we run like the move on the day is, although we go see it in person, our driver or foreman's not seeing it in person. We have an itemized list and we kind of break it through each room. So when we get to said house, they're walking through each room, doing kind of a walkthrough to make sure they know what they're bringing. And of course, like you said, oh, we're gonna bring this, bring that. That's my favorite
Yeah.
too. Is
Yeah.
magically all of a sudden everything starts coming. Oh, we weren't gonna bring this. Oh, yeah, we're gonna add this,
Yeah.
which is no problem because at the end of the day, whatever the client wants, we're gonna move. They just have to
Right.
understand that you have to be patient as we do this because they want to get it done just because it's super
Yeah.
stressful for them to do. So
Well, the
like you
same
said,
friend,
I
the same friend, like I literally go into a bedroom and like she had the door, like the closet door props closed. And I was like, what's in there? And she's like, what? Nothing. And I was like, what's in there? And I opened it and it's like a dresser. And she's like, well, I was just going to throw it in my car. I'm like, that dresser is not fitting in your Kia. Empty it out right now. Let's get this going. But oh my gosh, yeah, how do you sleep through a move? I literally am up at like 4:30 in the morning, showering, eating, getting ready,
yeah,
and then I'm like putting all the stuff, like the loose ends and stuff together, but that's terrifying. Let's take a quick break.
yeah.
All right, well, welcome back. So a couple things I want to talk about. One of the things that you said right before we went on break was that a foreman will go in. That was the word I couldn't remember, foreman. I literally walked in like a foreman. But so when a moving company gets there on moving day, a foreman does typically walk in the room and point, you point out what's going to go, what's not going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk through like that part, like what to expect. And is it like hourly that you're paying? Is it by the pound that you're paying? And, we'll kind of talk a little bit about that stuff.
Yeah, so it kind of varies based on the moving company in the sense that, when people do local jobs, I think 90% of the moving companies are going to want to do an hourly rate. We do hourly rate and the reason being is that if we take less time than what we're estimating, then the client's not paying for more time. We try and be fair and we do these due diligence in-home consultations, actually one thing that we did a lot more of and with AI and Zoom is doing virtual in-home consultations
Oh,
and the moving industry, and we could have a whole nother kind of podcast on how archaic and old school the moving industry
yeah.
is, but how it can come up to speed with all this new technology is there are new softwares that as you do these Zooms, it's picking up the items that you're looking to bring. But to go back to the hourly versus flat rate, we charge based on the volume that you're going to bring from point A to point B. And then some other things that are kind of wrapped up in this hourly is what we call travel, meaning the fuel mileage tolls, because unfortunately in New Jersey, there's a
A
ton of
ton of
tolls
it.
everywhere. And when you're in a truck, it's even more expensive. And then with gas. So it's very broken down the contract. And, the travel fee is unfortunately fixed because it is what it is with, the total miles that we're driving and the tolls that we have to do. But the hourly rate is, based on an estimate of how long it takes. And a lot of clients like going the hourly route because there's the incentive for us as a mover and for them that if it does take less time, the customer is not paying for that. Now, there's a 10% of movers that do this flat rate price. And some clients like that flat rate price because it's one price and they're not going to have to worry if it goes over or anything like that. However, it's generally higher than an hourly rate company because from a back end mover's perspective, we have to assume the worst and it's going to take a 14-hour day.
Right.
And, customers would like that peace of mind, like it's one price. When we go out of state, we do use flat rate, but generally speaking, with local moves, we're going to do it by the hour. And it's kind of based on preference. I like to educate customers that hourly might be the better way to go, only because we can reduce it down. But then clients tend to push back, like, what if it takes more? Which, generally speaking, if you have a legitimate moving company, they went out to go see it with Google Maps and Earth, we can kind of see what the building is like, whether it's a house or apartment. And if normally we don't go over, and if it does go over, it's by a slight few, and most people are kind of understanding because all movers are trying to get the job done. They're not trying to lollygag outside.
Right.
Let me take a snap or a Snapchat. Let me do a reel on Instagram. Like they
Unless
realize
you're
that,
me. And I'm doing it in the background
trying
anyway.
to get good content. So they want to get the job done. So I try and tell clients, yes, they're always like, well, what if it goes over? I was like, there could be a chance, but generally my guys want to get done. They want to be efficient. They want to get home at a reasonable hour. It's labor intensive. These guys don't want to be lifting furniture all day,
Right. And there's usually like a minimum. Like I've seen a
Correct.
2 or 3 hour
Yes.
minimum. And that's, in general, it's always going to take longer to load the truck than it is to unload the truck, right?
So
They can
true.
unload it in
So
like an
true.
hour.
Yeah.
Like
I
my
think
move took 9 hours. They took them 9 hours. And this is going back to Frank. Frank and his 1.5 men took literally 9 hours to load my house. And I've been through this so many times that I know
Right.
on average it's about 5, right? And that's with like,
Right.
I buy them lunch. I
There
still
you go.
tip them.
That's
I do
amazing.
all that.
Nice.
Because these people are taking my life in their hands and they're doing it so I physically don't have to, so
Right.
I think at the very least, and this is not just a courtesy, this is like at the very least, you buy them lunch and whatever they want,
Right.
you ask them, you don't just tell them what they're getting.
Yeah.
And then you have to tip them well. And I
Yeah.
would love to hear from your perspective what a good tip is, because I have what I think a good tip is.
Man, throw me on the spot. So
I
what
know. Well, do you
what
want to
I
hear what I
generally
say is, and you can confirm or deny?
Well, so this is what I say, and this might be
Okay.
a cop out. And well, first, I appreciate people like yourself that, these guys do very intensive labor work.
Yes.
It's, literally backbreaking to do it.
Mhm.
So anytime a client like brings a ice chest of Gatorades, water, snacks, food, it's amazing. Because at least it's gotten better, but more, there was a time where people weren't doing that, and it's not fair to the guys. But what I tell clients is, look, we appreciate your business. If tip is not included, we appreciate the tip. These guys, work hard. So if you can, give a tip, that'd be great. Some say X percentage. I don't want to say the percentage because sometimes it changes per move.
Yeah.
So what I tell clients and what I tell my drivers every time, because I try and go see my drivers every day before they go out, hey, we have a piano move. Let's make sure we got a piano board, extra straps. Hey, this is this elevator building. We know where it is in Hackensack. Bring 2 or 3 extra dollies. So you have, little tidbits of what we have. And then, we always have a whole pallet of water that we give our guys. But to give a percentage.
See, I don't do the
it's so hard.
percentages. It depends for me, and this is just me. So you can tell me if I'm a terrible
Right.
tipper or if I'm an amazing tipper. but depending on how many people they bring, right? So
Right.
like this last move, like I said, it was 1.5 guys. And another guy was supposed to show up and he never did. So like with the driver, but he had a physical disability, so he couldn't actually physically pick up stuff. I gave them $100 each because they did everything like in that. Now the move before getting down there, they brought 4 guys with them, and I gave them, I think, $50 each because they were each doing less.
Right.
But I still bought them lunch, and I still provided the cooler with all the drinks. I had Cokes in there and Gatorades and waters and all that stuff. But for me, it depends on how many guys they're bringing and how much stuff
Right.
I have, like this last move, I brought my washer and dryer. I had a desk that had to go through a window. Like I had a lot of stuff that was
Wow.
like unconventional, like they basically almost, it was interesting, but typically if it's like 2 to 3 guys, I'll do $100 a piece. If it's more than 2 or 3 guys, then I typically break it up $50 to $75 each.
So I think that's really generous. I think there was one thing that I heard, and I was at an event, and I think they said they base it on the tip on, and this is for someone that's tipping on how many hours they do the job. They do the hours of the job times
Yeah.
X. So $10 if it's an 8-hour job, or 5 hours, so that could be another benchmark.
That's a great, yeah.
And I also kind of read the room when I'm talking to a client and, hey, it's this kid moving from his home to his first apartment in the city.
gonna give
You
you 10
kind of know
bucks.
what you're getting, and you're going to
Right.
get maybe a case of beer and things of that. So I kind of address the guys, and they kind of see when I'm going there in person to be like, when I'm dispatching, it's like they kind of read the room.
Yeah.
They don't expect a tip at every job, which is kind of sad to say. But like I said, they appreciate if they do that. It's just the little things like, what I always tell clients is if you can give it to the guy specifically, you'd say like, thanks, Ed, thanks, John, thanks,
Mhm.
Steve. It really means a lot to them. It's something small, but instead of just giving it to the driver, because some of these guys, they
They'll
go
take
back to
it.
the truck and, to like physically see like, hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It goes a lot further than you think.
It's incredibly important for me to learn their names, learn a little bit about them, and not just because I'm like a total moving nerd and I love this shit, but because I want to make sure that like I know like who they are. Like if they have a
Right.
family, and it's not going to change the tip. I mean, if they're doing a phenomenal job, I'm always going to tip well. But I always hand them the money physically, and I thank
Yeah.
them physically because I am so grateful, especially now. Like I just came off of, I ruptured 3 discs in my back and have 4 pinched nerves, and I'm still like going through physical therapy. I I personally cannot move physically the way I used to. I mean, granted, I'm
Right.
old now, but I mean, at the same time, like I risk re-injuring myself, and that's significant. A lot of people have some sort of back injury, or they don't.
Yeah.
Like in my coaching, I go through robustness is like, so it's called FRED is the framework, and it's finances, robustness, which is mental and physical strength, ecosystem, and dreams. And so we start with your dreams, and then we kind of reverse engineer you into what you're doing with finances, like how much the movers are going to cost, to and from your apartment, all like whatever it is that you have to prepare for. But when I go through robustness, we talk physically about like, okay, where are you mentally? What experiences have you been in the past? Because this can be traumatic. Like people don't realize this is one of those like unsung, you know, no one really talks about a move being like traumatic, but you physically are
Oh, yeah.
transitioning. And
Yeah.
depending on the experience, like we'll go back to Frank, like it got so bad. Frank berated me for something that I didn't even know what he was talking about at the time. I think he had
Issues.
some instability issues. That was a nice way to say it. But I said something because we were 7 hours in, and we had to get somewhere. Like we had a 9-hour drive ahead, or 8. What did we have? We had an 8-hour drive ahead of us. And so we physically, to get to the place that we were going to next, like now it's like 7 o'clock at night. So now I have to get a hotel that night for myself and my, my parents and my brother. So there were like all kinds of things that we had to do. And I'm thinking in my head, like, I know this typically takes like 5 hours. But they didn't even have 2 of the rooms done and they hadn't touched the basement yet. So I know that's at least a couple more hours of getting things in. And I had a staging area. I had every box in the garage. And so he just kind of went out and like flipped out on me. But so it can be incredibly stressful. And if you're not mentally prepared for the stress of the day, that's one thing. But if you're physically not able to do it and you're not putting things where they need to, it's going to take longer. It's going to that's something that you need to be prepared for, because people don't think about that stuff, What
I always try and preach to my drivers, and it starts honestly from the first call. So I try and set the tone in a positive way, hand-holding way, and I try and reiterate that to my guys when they're on the job, is if you come in a bad mood, you had a bad night of sleep, you have XYZ, you almost, someone almost
like
sideswiped you.
Yeah,
Everything like that. And the client sees that, and like you said, their senses already heightened, they're already anxious and stressed out. It's gonna knock heads.
Yep.
Then my driver's gonna call me, then the customer's gonna call me. So that's why I try and be in person when these trucks go out, because you could tell if someone's having a bad day, or and the customer is nervous, and that just spirals out of control quickly. And that's something that we pride ourselves on customer service. And a lot of the things as movers is, like you said, is you're trusting us with a lot of your stuff. So the least that we can do outside of transporting your stuff is to have a smile on your face. And obviously not every customer is going to give you that smile, or going to be exact, all hyped up, ready to move.
Yeah.
But it should be for us to give that positive energy, that homey feel, that, hey,
trust
I know
us.
you're stressed out.
This. Yeah.
We got this, and that's why, we have those, walkthroughs, we have, those conversations. And like you said, these guys go right to work, and before you know it, the stuff's in the truck. You're like, all right, you rip the Band-Aid off, and okay, now we're ready to move in.
Yeah.
So I really preach on positive attitude. For us, from the start, from the first call to the in-home, is making sure that the customers are feeling in a good space, because it can turn disastrous. And then, like you hear with these horror stories of hostage moves, where the movers have a bad taste in their mouth, and guess what? They have all your stuff, and guess what? You have to pay me to get your stuff. And if you don't, and now I can be like, oh, well, now I want to charge you X, because they can make up whatever reason they want.
Yeah.
And you can call the cops, and the cops can be like, you signed this contract, you have to pay the mover, and then you're screwed,
Yeah.
So having a good dynamic between the customer and the mover and the moving team is huge. It's huge.
It just makes the experience so much different than than the horror stories you hear about. But but this has been great. We will definitely do a part 2, because I know there's so many other things that we need to talk about. I mean, we've got so many things that we could touch on. But you are with topnotchmovingnj.com to find you. How else can they find you? Social media? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
We're on social media at Top Notch Move. We are on Facebook, Top Notch Moving and Storage LLC. Please, please, please do not get us confused with Top Notch Movers in Jersey City. Can we say that?
Yeah.
Because
it's a different company. It's just a different company. Yeah.
So, please, if you can just make sure you go and look for the NJ. Look on our website. You have a picture of me on there and our guys. So more than happy to answer any questions you have. My email's on there. Excited for part 2, guys.
Yeah. And I will put your information in the show notes. And if you are on my Monday mailer, when this comes out, you will also get it in the email that I send out. So thank you so much, Ed, for being here. It's been such a pleasure. We're gonna have many more of these conversations. But thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you. I'm excited to continue the conversation.
Awesome. Well, I could go on forever and ever about moving you closer to your dreams, but I probably should save some thoughts for the next episode. A big thanks goes out to you for making time for me today. And making time for me, you're making time for future you, and we're both grateful. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the podcast, download the episodes, and leave me a 5-star review. I would really appreciate it. In return, if you go to my website, mariette'sonthemove.com, and register for the Monday mailer, I'll send you a free Fred workbook to get your journey started. This is also where you can find all the show notes and all the ways to get in touch with me. A special thanks goes out to Rogue Media for its wisdom and partnership. Until next time, friends, keep moving forward towards your dreams. Oh, and the legal stuff. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I am a certified coach, not a licensed therapist, and this is not meant to replace the professional advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. This is solely my perspective based on my own experience and training. Okay, now it's over. For reals. Bye for now.